bringing you yet another exciting episode of the Top Innovator series. This is where we dive into proven leadership ideas, game-changing strategies, and of course the brilliant minds behind them. I'm Joseph Martens and I'm excited to introduce today's guest, so let's jump right in. With us today is Tom Sweet. Tom is the CIO for Industrial Refrigeration Pros, a company that designs, builds, and services industrial refrigeration systems. Before that, he held several other tech executive positions in other companies. Tom, it's an absolute pleasure having you with us today.
Hi, nice to be here.
Let's dive into your leadership journey, because that's really the topic that we're interested in here. You've had a really accomplished career, and I'd be curious, based on your own reflection, based on what you think of your own journey, what do you think are some of the ingredients for your success? What do you think are the reasons for your success?
I think one thing is, I didn't just start off in leadership. I worked my way up like many people, and I've never forgotten that. And so when you have, in other companies, you have outages at night, getting on the call late at night with the rest of the team and being part of it. And then when you're trying to upskill the team and request that they study and get some certifications, like being part of that journey and showing them that you're leading the effort and you're getting the cloud certifications too. And maybe you even have more than them because you're trying to set the example that even at the executive level, continuous learning is important. And so when you do that, it winds up building some trust, and the team members understand you're part of the same journey with them, and you're not just barking orders, but you're leading them through that process.
Yeah. That's similar to what other technologists also experience, right? They start off as the technologist, being deeply immersed in the tech side, and at some point they shift to a leadership role. Talk about that transition, talk about that change that needs to happen there. What is difficult there? What's enticing about that change? How did you experience that shift?
Well, I mean, I changed careers. So for the first 6 years of my professional journey, I was doing civil engineering, which was road design and bridge design and that sort of thing. And I moved over in 1997 as an individual contributor. So even though I had been a manager in my engineering roles, I was an individual contributor, and I felt as though I couldn't be a manager because I didn't have that full tech stack that I thought that the leadership teams had. And as I went through a couple different jobs, right? And sometimes IT or high tech is a lot of change, right? Companies come and go due to just changes in technology and stuff. And eventually I had to really focus on getting back into leadership. But where my view differs than many is I still think people in leadership and technology still have to have some sort of hand in the technology in order to build it. I know that there's a pendulum and on one side, you have someone who's extremely technical who can't have conversations with the leadership team of the board of directors. On the other hand, you have the person whose first thing out of his or her mouth is, I'm non-technical. It's like, well, how do you lead a technical team if you're non-technical and the people looking up to you no longer want to be technical because they want to be like you? And then you have 3 or 4 layers of your leadership team that are all non-technical, trying to develop and send business value through technology. So that's kind of an interesting two set of extremes. And I think being in the middle and leading your team and still understanding where the world is going and watching YouTube videos and engaging with those in the field helps you understand the different changes coming to the marketplace. And as part of your job is to, again, deliver business value through technology for your company. And if you don't understand technology, how are you going to do that?
That's a great headline, delivering business value to a company through technology. I love that. Now, you asked that as a question, right? How do you both stay in touch with the technology and at the same time, how do you speak to the board? How do you stretch yourself? And you phrased it as a question, so let me bounce it right back to you. What's your answer to that question? How did you do it? How did you accomplish that stretch?
Hey, so some of the things I do in my personal life is I contribute to some cybersecurity exams. I've taken some certifications.
Okay.
As part of my continuing education credits, I have to maintain a number of continuing education credits across these different exams. So I'll contribute to the exam design for the future. That's one way to do that. I still, though I've not renewed a number of certifications, I still have, 6 Microsoft ones that I stay updated with. And I'm also part of different industry groups in the Dallas area. And so I can engage others. And so that helps me with my technology piece. And then on the other half, I have to remember to phrase things for someone off the street, because my CEO isn't necessarily a technical person. And if I start talking with some of these subjects, it's going to go over his head, right? So I got to use a lot of analogies, a lot of references to, the real world. And then like cooking, like a lot of people understand cooking. So if you say, hey, look, it's easy to cook a piece of toast, right? It's a lot much harder to cook for a large dinner, right? Or you can cook for your family, but when you cook for a church supper, right, there's a whole different set of steps involved, right? So I try to use a lot of analogies to get my point across.
I love it.
And
Okay.
that's been helpful.
I love it. Nice analogy. You talk about your CEO. I imagine CFO will be very similar and even less likely to be technically involved, right? And I don't know the person. I'm just guessing here. Same probably for the board, where you also have to change the language.
Well, I report to the CEO, so my interaction is mostly with him.
Yeah, got it.
Yeah.
Tell me what helped you on that journey. What were some of the factors where you felt this was important? I could either a tool that I could always go to as a fallback tool, or a person that was there in my corner as a mentor. Talk to me about the help that you received in your journey.
Well, I think, one thing, around right at about the time I turned 40, it got real, right? Where all of a sudden you start thinking about, wow, is there age discrimination? What am I going to do, right? So the idea of being an individual contributor wasn't necessarily as enticing as it had been. And the company I was working for was closing up the office in Denver and then moving it to another location, which was something that happened with a previous company that I worked for that decided to close up a location and move. So I had to take more control of my own destiny. One thing that was very helpful was to me to reach out to those in the CIO community and ask for advice. And I had about 50% success with this, which is going to be shocking, especially people who are in the sales industry and may not have that same level of success reaching out. But I'd reach out to people and say, hey, my name is Tom Sweet. I'm interested in advancing my career. I've looked at your career trajectory, and there are many things in it that I like. Would you be willing to meet with me and give me some advice? I mean, it was essentially something like that. And I had a lot of success, and many people in leadership roles, especially as they get towards the tail end of their career, are really willing to give back. So
interesting.
And that was, there were people who I still remember their names today that took time out of their day to assist me back in Denver.
Yeah. Were these, I'm really curious, were these people who were already in your network and you knew them, or was this a cold outreach in some cases?
Through Society for Information Management, or I knew them through, one happened to be a CIO of one of our customers at the company that I worked at. So, I mean, they weren't cold call, but they weren't really people I knew well, right? So,
And I'm curious, what kind of advice did you get from them? Tell me some of it sounds similar to a mentor relationship, maybe not
it was
for
like
a long period of time.
But one and done mentorship, right? Because asking people to be a mentor, no one's going to do that, because they're signing up for, they don't want to sign up on the first
for a long-term commitment, right?
But there was one woman whose advice, stood with me for years, and now it's well over a decade later. I forget it, but there was one. His name was Jim Galkey, the CIO of PDC Energy at the time, and he basically told me that I was no different than him, right? That he says the only difference is I have the title, meaning him, and I personally don't. But there's no difference. And then he was the one that talked about the value of delivering business value through technology, and that was 12 years ago, and then that or more, right? That's still stuck with me today, and so these little meetups can have a lasting effect on people.
I like the term one and done mentorship. And I'm definitely going to use that again because mentorship always sounds like something longer, right? It almost sounds like a burden. And one and done mentorship has something lighter
Yeah,
to
you're
it.
not really calling
Yeah.
it that. I'm
Yeah.
referring that way because you're asking them for advice. You
Right.
committed to
Right.
15, 20 minutes, which might go half an hour, and
Mm.
that's you have to honor that request and not
Mm.
then hit them up for another one. I mean, if they offer, it's different, but you're not trying to sign them up for
Right.
a long
Yeah.
term thing. You're
Right.
saying, hey, look, I got a number of people I'm trying to learn from. What you have to share, and
Yep.
if they have
Yep.
to share, that's great. If they don't, well, it's not personal. They may have a lot of other things going on in their career or their life right now, and now's not a good time for them.
Talk to me about the challenges that were there. Talk to me about the things that you felt were really hard, tough to crack. What is something that was a struggle on
I
that
think
journey?
culture change is always the hardest piece. I worked for a company that was the CEO was in the U.S. The global leadership team, including myself, was in the U.S. and the company was based out of Australia, owned by Australians. And so there was just always that little conflict there. And we even had a document written for Exxon back in 1976 that we had a copy of that talked about the culture change, the culture
Mm-hmm.
difference between Australia and the U.S. And then with that, we also had team members in the UK, we had team members in South America. So there's all these different cultures, and even between Chile and Brazil, there's a different culture between those two countries, and between Chile and Peru, there was a different culture. So trying to work through all of that and having empathy and understanding and not letting what seems like people fighting you all the time, not letting
Mm.
that get to you, right? It's just part. Sometimes that's just part of their interaction. And then
Mm-hmm.
now with our current situation, we've acquired 8 companies, so it's like 8 different uh, versions of spaghetti sauce, and you're trying to get someone to change how they've made their spaghetti sauce for 30 years. And with 8 different companies, there's 8 different cultures. They had 8 different benefit plans. They had 8 different approaches to email, 8 different sets of HR policies, and trying to pull that all into one. And then for me, with IT and cybersecurity, now you're changing everything to a far stricter IT and cybersecurity standard than they've been accustomed to in the past, right? And trying to work through that and explaining why,
Yep.
and using a lot of examples about phishing attacks that have come in, and here's how we stopped it, and giving examples of other companies who unfortunately have been victims, and many of them are competitors or customers in our space, and trying to show the why behind things. And I think the cultural aspect is always the hardest. Doesn't mean I don't get stuck for hours on some sort of open source project that doesn't work, but the cultural stuff is the more sensitive aspect of it.
That's the really tough one. Yeah. And I notice, of course, we just hit the cooking analogy. So thank you for weaving that in here as well. Now, I asked you about the past, about your leadership journey today. I'd love to take a look at today as well. What are the things, and obviously highly accomplished, right? You've reached a lot in that journey. And at the same time, we're all mindful of the fact that there's still growth, right? There's no end to us developing and learning more. What is
Mm-hmm.
something where you feel like you haven't quite cracked it yet? There's something that you feel, I want to grow in that area, I need to grow in that area. What's the leadership area where you feel like,
The leadership
if I,
area is again continuing to influence people. I don't know if you ever reach that goal. Right? You're trying to get better at it. You learn lessons. You make notes. But are you ever as good as you can be at influence and empathy? So
influence, okay.
mhm. Leading through influence, right? I mean, which is hard, right? You can you're always going to meet someone new whose background and characteristics and experiences you've never come across before, and you know, trying to make sure your toolbox has all those tools.
Got it. Now let's take a look at the future. If we were to speak again in 5 years, Tom, and I'm not asking about positions, companies, or anything like this, right? This is
Mhm.
about Tom. It's about your journey. If we were to meet in 5 years again, what would be different? What would you have accomplished in your leadership journey at that point that is sort of the next level of Tom's leadership journey?
Yeah, I think the next level would be, continuing to influence a global organization.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the other thing that I have a gap on is delivering a global application. I mean, again, we're a construction company right now. That's what we do.
Mm-hmm.
However, there's a lot of new technology coming in AI with machine learning, with all these different tools, and how can I implement those into, again, deliver business value through technology above and beyond the scope of what normally people see our company as. And that would
Mm-hmm.
be a really powerful uh, add-in for our company, and
Mm-hmm.
having me figure out how to lead that, how to lead a construction company to become a technology company.
Mm-hmm. Got it. That sounds like we're touching on innovation as well, right? Bringing something, developing this, that's at the center of innovation. Tell me some of the lessons you've learned about creating innovation or developing an innovation process or filling an innovation pipeline. What are some of the things that you've learned that
I
work
think you have to
really?
spend time. You have to
Mm,
dedicate time towards
mm-hmm.
innovation, right? 'Cause in many organizations, you're never going to have time, right? You're always too busy. You're always trying to put fires out. You have to have some dedicated investment and dedicated time towards that. I mean, right now I'm been playing with this Azure search, right? It's basically like our own internal chat GPT that we could use based on our own data. And there's some open source projects behind that. And of course, at the stage they're at, it's not like Linux, which has been around for 30 years, right? And it's really stable. These things
Mm,
are development on the fly, right? But
mm,
understanding, where this goes and can this be used, and then looking at that and showing people, before you invest too much time in the art of the possible. If we were to have this, what business problem could it solve? What are our
mm-hmm.
business needs? Where are our gaps today? Could this solution solve those problems? And
Yeah.
then trying to throw that, because again, who's going to do the innovation? I mean, again, we get back to websites. Like, everyone wants a website, but no one wants to put any content up, right?
Mm,
Everyone wants the solutions, but who's going to think about it? Who's going to create that? And I think it's the technology team who can run through some of these proof of concepts. Now, a larger company, I've worked for larger companies where they have a dedicated innovation group, right? But you're talking companies that have a 1,300 person IT team. So yeah, they can
mm-hmm.
have a team of 6 or 7 that run innovation experiments and collect ideas and work through those and try to surface, how those would work in the organization. But when you're a smaller company, we're a 500 person company. So it's going to be dependent upon my team to invest some time to always look on Reddit, to look on Microsoft site, to look on YouTube, to continue to see what's changing in the industry and how do we get ahead of things? How do we disrupt others? We don't want to be disrupted ourselves. How do we become the disruptor? And
Yeah.
it requires some leadership there to get out in front of this and learn.
Yeah.
And when
Yeah.
you look at many other companies, they don't do that, right?
Yeah.
I know many other CIOs who they're more concerned about golfing than they are about, what vendor's gonna pay for their golf this week, right?
And you're probably also confronted with the challenge to have the entire organization become part of the innovation team, I imagine, right? You have this
But you're
discussion
gonna have to
very
have
often.
people.
Uh,
You have to get as part of that culture, right? Because they're busy
uh-huh.
too. And hey, can you give us 30 minutes to look at this idea? Would this idea work for you?
Mm-hmm.
What's missing from it? Would you use it? If it did this, would you use it? And trying to work through that. And then if you
As,
have enough of
mm,
that, then you can ask for investment and create a project
yep.
around it. But sometimes you just got to do a little POC, maybe on your own time, just to say, hey, look, here's what I built
Yep.
this weekend. It can do this search. It can do this. Do you like this? Right? And then if you do, okay, well, now let's think about where it could be used.
Would this be useful? And you have that
Yeah.
conversation with the internal clients. Yeah,
Yeah.
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 Again, the question about value to the business there. Yeah. Talk to me where you see innovation go wrong. What have you seen as the big pitfalls where tech
I
leaders
think where
have
innovation
the
goes
fo-
wrong
mm,
is, unfortunately, sometimes companies invest in an innovation team
mm-hmm.
and and then the company falls on financially hard times, and the innovation team is one of the teams to be let go.
Yeah.
And I know a couple of people who've been on the receiving end of being let go because their whole team got let go as an innovation team. Now, sometimes innovation is great ideas, but getting them from the innovation team to getting them funded to getting them built, there's some time behind that. And unless it's something that an executive really believes in, these things may not get funded. They could be great ideas, but they may not get funded or ever implemented. And then when it comes time, if there's financially hard times, well, that team gets let go. I think that's, to answer your question, is that lasting commitment.
So it's the consistency, right? The continuity or the commitment to it, to the innovation effort. Yeah.
Yeah. Not just when the times are good, but when the times are bad too. So.
Exactly. Because that really shows the commitment to the innovation as well. Let me ask you one last question and then we'll wrap it up, Tom. What is an insight that you have, something that you've discovered, an aha moment that you had in your leadership journey where you feel like many don't have it? Something that you see clearly, something that you've discovered, and at the same time you realize not everyone has that. What might that be?
So I just did a LinkedIn video on this last week. And this is something that I should have known years ago, but it was an aha moment for me. I was reading a LinkedIn post in 2024, and someone, I don't know who, basically had these 3 comments. He says, does it need to be said? Does it need to be said right now? And does it need to be said by me? And so I thought about that, and I was like, yeah. And, because sometimes you'll see someone post something on LinkedIn and you believe it to be wrong. But, okay, it's wrong. Just let it go. Right? There's no sense of telling them. It doesn't solve any problem. And not just from politics, but just in general, right? Someone posts something that they believe to be correct. And yeah, maybe it is, maybe I'm wrong, but maybe in this case, let's say that the person is incorrect in an assumption or in a statement. Does it need to be said that he or she's wrong? Is now the right time to do it? And am I the person to say that? And so you can solve probably a lot of problems in your life by just following those 3 simple steps.
So here my analytical mind is coming through and I'm wondering, so these 3, they sound like a filter to me. Are they connected with an and or an or, these 3, right? Because my mind immediately went, the last one, shouldn't it be said by me, right?
But I think they build on each other. Does it need to be said? Well, probably not, right? If it does need to be said, does it need to be said right now, or can it, right? And if it does need to be said, am I the one to say it? And so I think they're additive.
Yep.
And,
okay.
Yeah.
Got it. So it's a call for caution essentially, right? It's or for prudence if you want.
Yeah, that would be a better way to say it. And it resonated with me, and I was like, yeah. And so I've remembered it since. So I think that was my best advice I learned in 2024. So.
Got it. Tom, thank you. Been an absolute pleasure having you today and having you share your thoughts on LinkedIn. I know, Tom, I should have mentioned this, right? You're very active on LinkedIn. You have several videos up on LinkedIn. People should check it out and see the message from you directly. Tom, thank you so much for having you today.
Thank you.
That's a wrap for today. For everyone out there, thank you so much for tuning in again. Don't forget, we're live on YouTube and LinkedIn regularly, sharing the latest insight from top innovators like Tom today. Be sure to like, subscribe, and follow us so that you don't miss the episodes that come up in the future. We look forward to seeing you next time. And until then, keep your brain cells active.